Hi, good morning and welcome to Paul's Property Podcast. This morning what we decided to do is the last couple of weeks we've spoken to young Aidan in kind of episode 1. We spoke to Aidan about my tips for how to look for property, how to go about it, how to consult people, who to speak to, how to take advice, make up his mind about things and grow with experience through the process. And then last time we spoke about the sales process, how one goes through that, what to do, again, how to communicate, who to talk to, who to build rapport and relationships with. Okay, so that, of course, in my mind, is statistically the correct way, if there is such a thing, of how to look for a property, how to take yourself through that sales process, through that minefield, by using small tips, predominantly communication. So what I thought we'd do this time is speak to one of my very dear friends, Sam, who has recently, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, completed on her first purchase, her first home, so to speak. So welcome, Sam.
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I've been listening for the last few weeks.
Oh, fantastic.
There's a lot of tips that I wish I knew at the start of this process.
Okay, so the process itself. The first question for me is, when did you first start looking? When did you first think, okay, now's the time to look for my property? Was there a thought of, if we look at last year, if I can use the expression, as someone said to me the other day, Trustgate, and the effect that had upon the market, the budget and so on and so forth, did that deter you? How did you go about it? Did you go to anybody for advice, or did you just get up one day and think, I'm going to go and find a house today, and go from there? Tell me how your journey started. Who did you speak to?
So I guess it's hard to pinpoint when it started, because I come from a family of absolute property obsessives. My mum and my stepdad, just their idea of fun is scrolling through Brighton, and I think that habit had kind of passed on down to me.
Yes.
So for the last few years, really, I've been just scrolling through, like looking at different areas in Brighton, getting a feel for different estate agents that operate here, and they're kind of areas that I like. For a while, I was also looking at places in Bristol, but it was a bit of a pipe dream because I wasn't ready. I had a lot of saving to do.
Yeah. So at what stage were you like, right now, I'm ready to take that step? You know, I've been scrolling through, I've been looking at different areas. Why you came to Brighton is another subject. For me, being Brighton born and bred, it's quite obvious because it's such a wonderful place to live. But what prompted you, and what was your first port of call, other than Rightmove, of course?
So it really was when my savings were getting to a point where I was thinking, okay, maybe soon in the next couple of years, I'll be ready. I had a life ISA, which was one of the best things I think I did, because that really helped to boost up my savings. And then it kind of got to the point where I'd left my job and gone freelance and thought, oh no, have I absolutely jeopardized my chances now? Because I knew it was going to be a lot more difficult to get a mortgage with my employment situation. But my parents encouraged me to talk to a mortgage broker. And for a while, I procrastinated on it because I thought, oh, I can't do that. I'm not ready. I don't know. What will I say? Will he think I'm wasting his time? But in the end, I did it. And it was actually just after the mini budget.
Right. So let me just, sorry, let me to interrupt there. The broker that you spoke to, how did you go about finding that broker? Was it a recommendation, or did you go out viewing, call up about a property and they said, come and speak to our broker? How did you get introduced to that broker?
It was honestly just a Google search.
Oh, really?
I typed in mortgage broker for freelancer, and this was the first person that came up. And I lucked out in a big way because he was excellent. And I had gone into the conversation with the main question being, what would I need to do to get myself into a position where I could buy in a year or two. And he kind of sat me down, went through all of my finances, took a good look at my situation, particularly the slightly complicated employment aspect of it. And he said, really, like with a little bit more saving, not too much at all, you can start looking in the next couple of months. And I was really nervous about the budget and what that had done to mortgage rates.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I was ready. My life was kind of in a situation where I was ready for that next step.
Okay.
And I thought, I'm just going to go for it.
Excellent. Hey, so you've been scrolling through, you've spoken to your broker. Did he speak about any particular lender, or was it just a case of get me some more money, Sam, and then we can really sit down and look at deals that are on the table? So potentially the window while you were for saving some more, did you then actually physically start going to look at property? And can you remember the first property that you viewed? Was it a nerve-wracking experience? How was the agent? Were they informative? Were they helpful?
Yeah, the first property that I viewed was quite soon after that conversation. And I went in not knowing, should I tell the agent about the ins and outs of my financial situation, or should I be keeping my cards close to my chest? And in the end, I went with just a very honest approach.
Yeah.
I did find that a lot of agents tried to push me into talking to their brokers.
Yeah.
And a couple of them, I actually did do that. And their brokers told me, you're not going to get a mortgage, stop.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
So I was that really I should have just stuck to the...
Yeah, it's difficult though, because as I explained to Aidan, and as he said to me last week, every agent that you see, give or take, will say, come and see our broker. And of course, when you're at that, I would imagine, it's been a long time for me, sorry. When you're at that stage, you know, you're dipping your toe in the water. Yeah. You're nervous. Yeah. Huge commitment. Yeah. So if someone's knocking you back or not knocking your confidence, that's not good. You know? So did you find that made you take a step back, or did you think, okay, not going to use the expression I just thought of, but let's move forward, and I still want to view, I still want to buy?
Yeah, so it did knock my confidence quite a lot, and it made me question whether the first mortgage broker I'd spoken to was right. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a good go. Yeah. So I went ahead, I kept viewing places. I had this huge list of questions.
You made a wish list.
I made a wish list.
Brilliant.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
So my wish list was, I wanted to have a bath.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a tiny bit of outdoor space.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit hard to come by in Brighton for my budget. I ideally really wanted to have an open plan kitchen diner so that I could have my friends around and not be just cooking on my own. And then there were some things to do with different areas that I liked more than others.
Okay.
And to be honest, a lot of that was related to how long it would take me to walk and see my friends.
Yeah, sure.
So I had these things in my head, which, as I was looking on Rightmove, I was increasingly thinking, this is absolutely impossible.
Sure.
So I looked at lots and lots of properties.
How many did you view?
Or maybe 25.
Okay, that's not.
I viewed everything within my budget.
Yeah.
And saw.
It's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had this anxiety the whole time about whether I was wasting people's time. But I was very open with all the agents about my budget and what I was looking for, and hoped that would...
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
They would also be honest with me.
Well, exactly. It's not only that. I think that it's important for, you know, an agent's meant to be an expert in that field. And what I do, if somebody phones up about property A, if I've got a property B, C, D, and E that are similar, you know, and with respect, the buyer's on a budget, I always say, keep an open mind, because you never know what you're going to trip over or you might have dismissed something on Rightmove, but you actually physically get in there rather than relying on the photos and floor plans and so on. Actually physically go and view the property, which I think is key, to get into as many as you can, or as many as an agent would recommend, because they're not, to be frank, they're not going to waste their time.
Yeah.
Their manager will be telling them to use their time efficiently, so I always say to someone, listen, just hop in my car, let's go shopping, and let me show you 4 or 5 different properties, and let's see what you think. And that should narrow down your wish list. I mean, did any agent do that? Or were they just showing you this property, and then you'd phone up about another property and so on?
One agent did do that, and it was really helpful. I was then able to build up a better relationship with that agent. And like you were saying, the communication was there. They understood what I was looking for and what I was and wasn't up for doing, particularly in terms of work needed on a property. And that's something where I very nearly fell down, because the whole time when I was growing up, my family always lived in project houses. And that made me feel like I could take on a much bigger project than my budget would actually allow. So I looked at a few places that needed a lot of work.
Right.
And completely fell in love with them.
Yeah.
And then had to have a bit of a reality check.
Yeah.
Even if I was up for a bit of work.
Yeah. But even that's part of the process. So I think that's an excellent thing that you did, because you wanted X, could you get X? Potentially not, but we've had a look anyway. Yeah. So I'd rather do that than to be scared away from it, because I might not, in inverted commas, be able to afford it. But at least I've given it a go, which is what the whole process is about. Is to find that perfect home for you at this time, the one that ticks as many boxes as possible that your budget will allow. Yeah. So, and all this time, at the same time, your broker was giving you support and getting things in place and saying, just another £1,000, Sam. Just another, I was about to say monkey then, just another £500, so working kind of in tangent to get you ready on the finance side for when you found that golden property.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I'd say is I went in to every single viewing with a huge list of questions. Some of them were things for me to look at. For others were questions that I wanted to ask the agent. And during, I'd say, the vast majority of the viewings, the agents that I was speaking to were saying, oh, we don't know. You're going to have to just email the office about that.
Oh, really?
And I got that over and over again. I often felt like I knew more about the property from Rightmove and looking on Google Maps and hanging about in the area than the agent did. Sometimes it felt like it was the first time they were seeing the property.
Yeah, okay.
Which was, I don't know, it doesn't instill that much confidence.
It doesn't. And again, that's a kind another subject to look at, potentially how we do viewings, which we can talk about with our wonderful listeners another time. But we then getting that feedback from the office. So the property that you found at the end, what I'm trying to say is, do you think that you might have found something better or similar earlier if the information had been readily on hand? It's quite a big question.
Yeah.
It's quite a big deal for me.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think I would have had more confidence and trust and less kind of this constant second guessing myself. And it's a huge decision. And when it's the first time that you've done it, and there's no real manual on what you're meant to do. Well, there is now. There's a cool property podcast. But when I was doing this, I just had a lot of questioning myself and thinking, this is the most huge financial decision. Am I making the right decision?
Okay. So the property that you found, your new home, did you, when you walked in that door, did you get that feeling that, wow, okay, I'm home?
Yeah, it was instant. And I think that's what I'd really been waiting for and thinking, okay, maybe my Rightmove habit has actually done a bit of a number on me here because I have dreams that are much bigger than my budget. But this property I walked in, instantly loved it, felt like I'd feel really safe living there, feel really happy, content. It did meet all of my wish list criteria.
Fantastic.
Which I think it was the only one that did.
No.
Yeah.
It only takes one. Only takes one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also with that agent, I had a very different experience.
Good.
He just felt very trustworthy.
Yeah.
And I know he's working for the vendor, but I also felt like he was being very honest with me. And
that's good to hear.
Could tell that I loved the place. I didn't do the whole keep your cards close to your chest thing.
Sure.
I just, it was very obvious.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's brilliant. So with this particular agent, who I must emphasize, actually wasn't me, I'm afraid. I'm not trying to plug myself here. So you found the property, you spoke to your broker.
Yeah.
Were you encouraged to put forward an offer, or did you just say X amount? Did you have to think of a figure? Did you offer the asking price? Did you negotiate? Was that a little bit of a game of chess for you?
I negotiated, and it does not come naturally to me at all. So I found it horrible. But I had to negotiate because the asking price was just more than I could afford. So I was left without a choice, really.
Yeah.
And I had lots of conflicting advice from my family on,
of course,
where to begin.
Yeah.
My uncle's a bit of a hardballer and was suggesting a figure which I would be entirely embarrassed to put forward because I felt like it was not fair. But I kind of settled on something that I thought was a very reasonable starting point.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had a little bit of wiggle room, but not a huge amount.
Yeah.
And the offer got refused.
Okay.
So I went back slightly higher, and that got refused as well.
Okay.
But then the seller said, if you can get to this point,
that's good. So he came back with a counter offer.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And that was a little bit of a stretch, but by that point I'd saved up a little bit more money so I could.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So a bit of back and forth, which is always the way, 9 times out of 10, especially in today's better market. You're still negotiating. So you set on a price, you've got your mortgage ready, been agreed now in principle. Did that agent require you to see their broker? Out of interest.
I did speak to their broker over the phone.
Yeah.
But it was really just to
verify your position.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To check that I could actually afford it and I was a serious buyer.
Wonderful.
So yeah, that was all quite smooth. I thought, so my offer was accepted in December last year, and I thought, I'll be in by February. It's plain sailing from here.
Yeah.
It was not.
No.
It turned out to be quite complicated.
Yeah. So the solicitor conveyancer that you used, where did that come from? Was that a recommendation from a friend, family, or from the agent themselves?
So the solicitor I used was a recommendation from one of my friends who had quite recently bought a property in Brighton as well. So I thought, great. However, the solicitor is not local.
Right.
And I think that's something that was a big learning curve for me. It would have been very helpful if they had been local.
Yes.
And I could have popped in.
Yeah.
Because the communication with the solicitor was poor to say the least. Yeah. And that was a real source of stress.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point. I think something we went through with Aidan last week was how I feel it's important to use someone local, not just for convenience for yourself to pop in with your ID, money's on account, rather than have to put it through a portal, or which I wouldn't have a clue where to start. I really, really wouldn't. And not only that, depending what type of property you bought, a huge amount of properties in Brighton and Hove are listed, and a lot of solicitors outside of the city don't understand the listings and so on and so forth, and different ways the conservation works and so on. So, I cannot recommend enough to use a local, but you are where you were where you were. So, just to make those mindful, so you just trod on a mine and up you went. So obviously the process took a lot longer, but the agent themselves, they have someone to help you through that turmoil?
Yeah, so they had a sales progressor who was absolutely excellent. I still feel that the sale would just not have gone through without her being very persistent and
good communication,
chasing things up constantly.
Yeah.
There were times when we were talking multiple times a day, and I thought, how is she managing this with other clients as well? Because she was excellent. And I feel like we had a really good relationship and were talking a lot. So the communication was there with her. The communication was also there with my broker, who was really
brilliant,
fantastic. And there were some complications because the property that I was buying is a old house that had been divided into 2 flats, and the seller wasn't going to register the lease until after the sale had gone through.
Okay.
Which actually I didn't know when I put my offer in, but this really reduced the pool of lenders that I could go with down to 1. Really.
So the lease was at a shorter length.
No, so the lease is actually 999 years.
I see. So they had to create the lease. Is that correct?
They had to create it from scratch because the property was being divided into 2. A lot of lenders didn't like that. They wanted the lease to be
done already,
existing. And you can understand it because the details were still being ironed out right up until the day when we completed.
That's poor.
But
in essence, with your broker communicating well, and obviously found you the right lender for the right property. The sales progressor taking away that uncertainty and, frankly, annoying lack of communication from your solicitor. Onus is on them to deal. So you felt guarded and protected and literally been helped through.
Yeah, those 2 people were just fantastic.
Brilliant.
Absolutely fantastic. With all the issues that I had with my solicitor and not being able to get hold of her, I was constantly ringing other people in her office, trying to get her to speak to me. Eventually it meant that we still hadn't exchanged in the week that we were meant to be completing.
Right.
So everything ended up getting pushed back a little bit. We ended up exchanging and completing on the same day. Which was also the day that we finalised everything to do with the lease. So it was a little bit stressful towards the end. But
wow. So you exchanged on the same day you completed, be it being a mortgagee as well. So to be fair to your solicitor, that's really not a tough thing for them to do, but people think that as a whole, that solicitors do X amount of work that they get paid very well for, I hasten to add. Then exchange, then it's just a matter of completing. But they actually have to do a huge amount of work, which is one of the reasons that they normally take a working week between exchange and completion, because the lender doesn't like, or the solicitor doesn't like the lender to draw down the funds, forgive me, for the solicitor to draw down the funds. It takes 5 days for that to come through, because they have to do a whole lot of work between exchange and completion, post-exchange. So for the solicitor to do that, probably is their saving grace, I would have thought, to enable you to exchange and move on that same day.
Well, you're absolutely right, to be fair to her, because in the end, she really stepped up. It was just right at the end of the process.
Good. Excellent. So your journey is almost, different from what I've suggested to Aidan, but the fantastic thing is that you got a good broker that communicated well. Your agent that you were buying through had a good sales progressor who communicated really well. Thus, you've been able to work your way through that minefield, being guided by two great individuals, which is superb and fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also just the feeling of getting the keys, opening the door for the first time was amazing.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough how much it's been worth all the stress.
Yeah, no, I generally can imagine, been there, obviously, myself on a number of occasions. So to compare, as you mentioned earlier, if you'd heard the podcast, would that have changed the direction that you would have taken?
Yeah, I think if I had heard the podcast, I would have done the same with my broker because I lucked out there, but that really was luck. And if I had heard the podcast, I would have been a bit more intentional about it. I would definitely have gone to more local estate agents and built better relationships with them in the viewing process, because a lot of them I just met once for a one-off viewing and felt like they didn't really know the property, whereas I think the advice that you gave Aidan was to really build those relationships with local estate agents, go into the office, get to know them. I wish I had done that. Yeah. And I think that probably would have made the process a bit easier.
I mean, the good news is, though, that you tripped over a very good agent who was able to get you out, show you properties, build a rapport, had that level of expertise with him or her, and so that you could trust them. And they also introduced you to your new home, which is superb. So tripped over, lucked out a bit on a broker and the agent that happened to have a good sales progressor. Yeah. So very fortuitous in the property world that we live in.
I was very lucky. And I think the advice that you've given means that other people could not have to be lucky, but could be more deliberate about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is that as and when, hopefully not too soon, you choose to move, hopefully, I mean, you will have learned a huge amount through your own journey. Yeah. And secondly, taking some tips, hopefully, from what we've spoken about.
Yeah. Well, I'll come straight to you, Paul.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. Enough said. Enough said. Well, listen, I very much hope that everybody has enjoyed today's chat. And as you can see, there's a big difference between really studying and taking your time and communicating and taking a step back and building relationships, as opposed to, with respect to Sam, jumping on Rightmove, getting a mortgage broker out of Google, and in Sam's case, she was very fortuitous. But always communicate, always do your research, always look and talk to people, and that will aid you. As I say, Sam was very lucky with a broker and found a good agent, which with respect to my counterparts in the city is a little bit tricky. But I hope that you, again, today have picked up on some tips for your own property searches. And one last thing I'd just like to add. Well, first of all, thank you, Sam, for joining me today and taking me through that minefield. I hope you're still not having nightmares. And it would help, of course, tremendously if you'd help us to put the word out about these podcasts, because I really feel, and we're getting some great feedback about how it's actually genuinely helping people look for their new home, moving forward, the mortgage market, how to deal with viewing, sales processes. And if you like and subscribe to this podcast, please do. And we very much look forward to speaking to you next week. Have a great day. Bye-bye.